Welcome, dear friend. I know you watch this video to fall asleep. So before that, like, comment, and share this video. Also, where are you from? And what time is it where you are from? Tonight, you are about to embark on an extraordinary journey through 500 timeless Buddhist stories, each one carefully selected and lovingly narrated to guide you into the deepest, most restorative sleep of your life. As you settle into your most comfortable position, allow your body to sink deeper into relaxation with each word I speak. Feel the weight of the day dissolving from your shoulders, your mind beginning to quiet, and your breath naturally slowing to match the gentle rhythm of these sacred teachings. For over 2.5 millennia, Buddhist, something profound about masters, have understood the human mind and spirit. They discovered that certain stories, when shared with mindful intention, possess an almost magical ability to calm our restless thoughts and transport us to realms of perfect peace. Tonight, you will experience this ancient art of storytelling meditation, where each tale serves as a gentle bridge between your waking consciousness and the serene depths of healing sleep. These are not ordinary bedtime stories. Each narrative in our collection has been passed down through generations of monks, teachers, and spiritual seekers who recognize their transformative power. They are wisdom teachings disguised as simple tales, meditation practices woven into engaging narratives, and profound truths delivered through the softest, most soothing voice. What makes this collection truly special is its intention. Unlike stories meant to excite or stimulate, these Buddhist tales are specifically designed to slow your mind, release tension from your body, and create the perfect conditions for deep, restorative sleep. Each story follows the natural rhythm of relaxation, beginning gently and gradually, dissolving into peaceful silence. You might wonder why Buddhist stories are so effective for sleep and meditation. The answer lies in their unique structure and wisdom. Buddhist teachings often focus on letting go, accepting impermanence, and finding peace in the present moment. These themes naturally align with the mental state we need for quality sleep. As your mind absorbs these gentle lessons, it automatically begins to release the worries, plans, and mental chatter that typically keep us awake. Tonight's journey will take you through mountain monasteries, where wise monks share their insights with seekers just like you. You'll visit peaceful gardens where every flower holds a lesson about compassion and understanding. You'll walk alongside travelers discovering profound truths in the simplest moments, and you'll rest in meditation halls where silence itself becomes a teacher. Each story in our collection has been chosen not only for its spiritual wisdom, but also for its ability to create what meditation masters call mind-like still water. This is the state where thoughts settle naturally, like sediment in a calm lake, leaving behind crystal clear awareness that effortlessly transitions into peaceful sleep. The beauty of this approach is that you don't need to concentrate or try to understand every detail. Simply allow the words to wash over you like gentle waves on a peaceful shore. Your subconscious mind will absorb the wisdom and tranquility these stories offer, while your conscious mind gradually releases its grip on the day's concerns. As we begin this collection, remember that there is no right or wrong way to listen. Some nights, you might find yourself drifting off during the first story. Other evenings, you might remain peacefully aware through several tales before sleep naturally arrives. Both experiences are perfect because the goal is simply to create space for rest and renewal. You'll notice that my voice will gradually become softer and more soothing as each story unfolds. This is intentional, designed to match your body's natural progression towards sleep. The pacing will slow, the words will flow like honey, and the silence between sentences will grow longer, giving your mind ample time to absorb the peace these ancient teachings offer. These stories come from various Buddhist traditions, spanning different countries and centuries. Some originate from the earliest teachings of the Buddha himself, while others emerge from the wisdom of Zen masters, Tibetan monks, and forest meditation teachers. What unites them all is their power to transform our inner landscape from chaos to calm, from anxiety to acceptance, from restlessness to profound rest. In our modern world, we're constantly bombarded with stimulation, information, and demands for our attention. Our minds rarely get the opportunity to truly settle and find peace. These Buddhist stories offer something precious and increasingly rare: permission to slow down, to let go, and to simply be present with wisdom that has comforted countless souls throughout history. Each tale carries multiple layers of meaning, like gifts wrapped within gifts. On the surface, you'll hear engaging stories about monks and students, animals and nature, simple encounters that reveal profound truths. But beneath these narratives flow deeper currents of wisdom about compassion, mindfulness, acceptance, and the art of living with an open heart. The meditation aspect of tonight's experience happens naturally. As you listen to these stories, your mind will automatically begin to focus on the present moment. The gentle rhythm of the narratives, combined with their peaceful themes, creates a natural meditative state that requires no effort on your part. This effortless meditation then becomes the perfect gateway to restorative sleep. You might find that certain stories resonate more deeply than others. This is completely natural and speaks to the personal journey each of us is on. The wisdom you need most will find its way to you, often in the most unexpected moments. Trust this process and allow yourself to receive whatever gifts these ancient teachings wish to offer. Some listeners discover that these stories not only improve their sleep, but also bring a sense of calm and clarity that extends into their waking hours. The principles of Buddhist wisdom have a way of integrating themselves into our daily experience, helping us respond to life's challenges with greater equanimity and peace. As we prepare to enter our first story, take a moment to set an intention for tonight's journey. Perhaps you wish to release the stress of the day, or maybe you're seeking comfort during a difficult time. Possibly, you're simply ready to experience the deep rest that has been eluding you. Whatever your intention, know that these stories are here to support and nurture you. Allow your breathing to become even slower and more relaxed. Feel your body melting into whatever surface supports you, whether it's your bed, a comfortable chair, or perhaps a meditation cushion. Notice how each exhale carries away a little more tension. Each inhale brings a little more peace. The room around you is growing quieter now, or perhaps you're simply becoming more attuned to the stillness that was always present. This is the perfect state for receiving the wisdom and tranquility these stories offer. Your mind is clear and receptive, your body is comfortable and relaxed, and your spirit is open to the healing power of ancient wisdom. Our first story comes from a mountain monastery in ancient Tibet. where the thin air and vast silence created perfect conditions for deep meditation and profound insights. Here, among peaks that touch the heavens, a young seeker discovered a truth that would forever change how he understood the nature of peace and contentment. This monastery, perched high above the world's concerns, housed masters who had spent decades perfecting the art of inner stillness. They understood that true peace cannot be found in external circumstances, but must be cultivated within the garden of one's own consciousness. Tonight, you are invited to join this ancient lineage of peace seekers as we explore their timeless wisdom. The monastery bells had just finished their evening song when young Tenzin approached his teacher, Master Nobu, with a question that had been troubling his mind for many weeks. The golden light of sunset painted the meditation hall in warm hues, and the silence between them felt as vast as the mountain valleys stretching endlessly below. "Master," Tenzin began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I have been meditating faithfully for 3 years, yet my mind still races like a wild horse. I watch other students who seem to find such effortless peace, while I struggle against thoughts that multiply like summer clouds. What am I doing wrong?" Master Nobu smiled with the gentle understanding that comes only from having once asked the very same question. He gestured for Tenzin to sit beside him on the simple wooden bench that overlooked the monastery garden, where evening flowers were beginning to release their subtle fragrance into the cooling air. "Tell me, young friend," the master said, "when you tend the monastery garden, do you become angry with the weeds that grow among the flowers?" Tenzin considered this carefully. "No, master. Weeds are simply part of nature. I gently remove them and continue tending the plants that we wish to flourish. And when storms come and bend the young trees, do you curse the wind for disturbing their peaceful growth?" "Of course not," Tenzin replied. "The wind is neither good nor bad. It simply is. We stake the trees to help them grow strong, and we understand that storms will pass." Master Nobu nodded approvingly. "Your mind, dear student, is like this garden. Thoughts arise as naturally as weeds among flowers, as inevitably as wind across the mountains. The mistake many seekers make is believing they must stop all thoughts from arising, as if they could command the wind to cease blowing or the seasons to halt their eternal dance." The old master paused, allowing his words to settle like gentle snow on still water. In the distance, a temple bell chimed softly, marking the transition from day to night. "True meditation is not about creating an empty mind," he continued, "but about changing your relationship with whatever arises in consciousness. When you notice thoughts appearing, greet them as you would greet weeds in the garden, with neither welcome nor rejection, but with simple acknowledgement before returning your attention to the breath." Tenzin felt something shift within his understanding, like a door opening in a room he hadn't known existed. "So, I should not fight against my thoughts? Fighting thoughts only gives them more energy," Master Nobu explained. "It's like trying to smooth water with your hand. The more you stir, the more turbulent it becomes. Instead, learn the art of gentle noticing. When the mind wanders, simply note thinking and return to your breath with the same kindness you would show a child who has lost their way." As darkness settled over the monastery, the master lit a small oil lamp, its flame steady and unwavering despite the evening breeze. "Watch this flame," he said. "Does it struggle against the darkness? Does it become agitated when shadows dance around it? No, it simply shines with quiet consistency, neither grasping for more fuel nor fearing the moment when it will naturally extinguish. Tenzin watched the flame in fascination, seeing in its gentle steadiness a perfect metaphor for the kind of awareness teacher was describing his. The flame remained constant, while everything around it shifted and changed, exactly the quality of mind he longed to cultivate. Your awareness is like this flame, Master Norbu continued. It need not struggle or strain. It need only remain present and steady while thoughts, emotions, and sensations arise and pass away like shadows dancing on the wall. This is the essence of meditation, not the elimination of experience, but the cultivation of equanimity toward whatever appears. Over the following weeks, Tenzin practiced with this new understanding. Instead of viewing his busy mind as an enemy to be conquered, he began to see it as a natural part of human experience, to be observed with compassionate awareness. When thoughts arose during meditation, he would gently note breath, just their presence, and return to his as he would tend to the monastery garden with patient care. Gradually, something remarkable began to happen. The more gently he treated his wandering mind, the more naturally it began to settle. Like water that becomes clear when left undisturbed, his awareness grew increasingly peaceful as he stopped struggling against its second story. Takes us natural movements, hour to a different setting entirely. A bustling marketplace in ancient India, where the sounds of merchants calling their wares and the colorful chaos of daily commerce created an unlikely backdrop for spiritual insight. Here, among the crowds and commerce, lived a humble shopkeeper named Ananda, who had spent years searching for peace through elaborate spiritual practices. He had memorized countless scriptures, performed complex rituals, and sought teachings from numerous masters. Yet the profound tranquility he yearned for remained elusive. One particularly busy market day, as Ananda struggled to maintain his composure amid the noise and demands of customers, an elderly woman approached his stall. Unlike the other shoppers who hurriedly examined his goods and negotiated prices, she moved with unusual serenity, her presence somehow creating a pocket of calm in the surrounding chaos. "Good merchant," she said with a voice like gentle rain, "I seek not goods for purchase, but I wonder if you might spare a moment to share what troubles you. I see in your eyes a restlessness that no amount of worldly success can satisfy." Ananda was startled by her perceptiveness. Though he had built a prosperous business and was respected in the community, he indeed carried a deep inner turmoil that seemed to grow stronger despite his spiritual efforts. "Wise woman," he replied, "I have spent years seeking enlightenment through study and practice, yet peace remains as distant as the stars. I meditate at dawn, recite prayers throughout the day, and study sacred texts deep into the night, but my mind continues to churn like monsoon waters." The woman smiled with infinite compassion. "Dear friend, perhaps you are trying too hard to capture something that cannot be grasped. Tell me, when you hold water in your cupped hands, what happens if you squeeze tightly to keep it from escaping? It slips through my fingers," Ananda answered, beginning to sense the wisdom in her question. "Exactly so. And what happens when you simply allow your hands to remain naturally cupped, neither grasping nor pushing away? The water remains gently held," he realized. "Peace is like this water," the woman explained. the harder we grasp for it, the more it eludes us. But when we simply create the right conditions, a mind that is open and receptive rather than demanding and controlling, peace reveals itself naturally, for it was never truly absent. She gestured toward the busy marketplace surrounding them. You see chaos here, noise and distraction. But what if I told you that this very marketplace, with all its apparent disorder, contains the same potential for peace as any mountaintop monastery? The difference lies not in changing your circumstances, but in transforming your relationship to them. Ananda looked around with new eyes, trying to perceive the marketplace through her perspective. But how can one find stillness amid such commotion? By understanding that stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of centered awareness, she replied. The hub of a spinning wheel remains motionless, while the rim turns swiftly. In the same way, you can cultivate an inner stillness that remains unshaken regardless of external circumstances. The woman reached into her simple bag and withdrew a small, perfectly round stone, smooth from years of river current. This stone has found its perfection not by avoiding the turbulent waters, but by allowing them to shape it. Each impact, each tumble, each moment of apparent chaos contributed to its current state of balanced beauty. She placed the stone in Ananda's palm, where it felt surprisingly warm and comforting. Your spiritual journey is like this stone's path through the river. Every challenge, every moment of inner turmoil, every seeming failure to find peace is actually polishing away the rough edges of your consciousness, revealing the natural serenity that has always been your true nature. From that day forward, Ananda approached his spiritual practice with a radically different understanding. Instead of forcing his mind into artificial states of calm, he learned to work with its natural rhythms. During busy market hours, he would occasionally pause to take a conscious breath, remembering the stone in his pocket and the woman's teaching about finding stillness within movement. Rather than viewing the marketplace noise as an obstacle to peace, he began to use it as a reminder to return to present moment awareness. The calling of vendors became bells of mindfulness, the bustle of customers a prompt to reconnect with his inner stillness. Months passed, and a remarkable transformation occurred. Ananda discovered that the peace he had sought through years of complicated practices was actually available in each simple moment of conscious presence. The marketplace that had once seemed like a spiritual obstacle became his monastery, and the ordinary interactions of daily commerce became opportunities for practicing compassion and mindfulness. Our third tale brings us to a mountain village where the seasons painted their eternal story across terraced fields and ancient forests. Here lived an old farmer named Kenji, whose weathered hands had worked the same soil for 6 decades, and whose deep understanding of natural cycles had taught him profound lessons about acceptance and the art of letting go. Kenji's farm sat on a hillside overlooking the village, where he grew rice in carefully tended paddies that reflected the sky like mirrors during planting season. His neighbors often sought his advice, not only about crops and weather, but about life's deeper challenges, for his quiet wisdom had been seasoned by years of observing nature's patterns. One autumn evening, as golden light filtered through trees heavy with changing leaves, a young man named Hiroshi climbed the path to Kenji's farmhouse. Hiroshi carried the weight of recent loss, His beloved wife had passed away suddenly, leaving him struggling with grief that seemed to have no end. Uncle Kenji, Hiroshi said, using the respectful title reserved for elders, I have come seeking your guidance. 3 months have passed since my wife's death, yet my heart feels as heavy as the day she left this world. Everyone tells me I should be healing, moving forward, but I find myself unable to let go of my sorrow. Kenji set down his teacup young man's and studied the face with eyes that held decades of compassion. Walk with me to the rice fields, he said simply, and together they made their way down the terrace slopes where the evening harvest moon casts silver light across the water. Tell me, Hiroshi, what do you see when you look at these fields? Hiroshi gazed across the paddies, their surfaces disturbed only by gentle ripples from the evening breeze. I see rice ready for harvest, water that reflects the moon, and emptiness, where the growing season will end. Ah, Kenji nodded. And does this emptiness sadden the rice? Does the grain resist being harvested because it fears the barren winter that will follow? Of course not, uncle. The rice has completed its purpose. The harvest is the natural end of its cycle. Kenji smiled and knelt beside the water's edge, cupping some of the cool liquid in his weathered palms. In spring, I plant seeds in these fields with great hope and care. In summer, I tend the growing plants through heat and storms. In autumn, I harvest what has matured. And in winter, I allow the fields to rest empty, gathering strength for the next cycle. He let the water slip through his fingers, watching as it returned to the paddy. Your grief, dear Hiroshi, is like the winter season of your heart. It is not something to be rushed through or avoided, but honored as part of love's natural cycle, just as these fields need their season of apparent emptiness to prepare for new growth. Your heart needs its time of sorrow to integrate the love you shared. Hiroshi felt tears gathering in his eyes as he contemplated this perspective. But everyone expects me to be better by now. They say I should focus on happy memories and move on. Ah, Kenji chuckled softly. And do they also tell the cherry blossoms to bloom in winter or the autumn leaves to refuse their time of falling? Grief has its own seasons, its own timing that cannot be hurried by well-meaning advice. They walked along the narrow paths between the paddies, their footsteps quiet on the packed earth. The air carried the scent of ripening grain and distant wood smoke from village hearths. When my first 40 wife died years ago, Kenji continued, I fought against my sadness like a man trying to hold back the tide with his bare hands. I thought that letting go of grief meant letting go of her, and I could not bear that thought. It was only when I learned to see grief as love to find peace. Love nowhere to go that I began with nowhere to go, Hiroshi repeated softly. I never thought of it that way. The love you carry for your wife hasn't died with her body, Kenji explained. It has simply changed form, like water that becomes vapor, yet remains water. Your grief is that love seeking new ways to express itself. Perhaps through kindness to others, through living the values she cherished, through carrying forward the lessons she taught you. They paused at the highest terrace, where the entire valley spread below them like a living tapestry. Village lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and the sound of distant temple bells drifted on the evening air. The seasons teach us that nothing truly ends, Kenji said, only transforms. Your wife's love for you continues in your memories of her laughter. in the way you learned to see beauty through her eyes, in the compassion she awakened in your heart. These gifts remain, even as the form of your relationship has changed. Hiroshi stood in contemplative silence, feeling something shift within his understanding. The crushing weight of his grief remained, but somehow it felt different. Not a burden to be discarded, but a sacred carrying of love. How do I honor this grief without being consumed by it? He asked. Like tending a garden, Kenji replied. You give it attention and care, but you also plant new seeds alongside the memorial flowers. You water the grief when it needs acknowledgement, but you also cultivate gratitude, hope, and connection with those still walking this path with you. As they made their way back to the farmhouse, Kenji shared one final teaching. In the spring, I will plant new rice in these same fields where this year's harvest grew. The old crop nourishes the new, and the cycle continues. Your life too will have new seasons, new growth, new joys, not as replacements for what you've lost, but as continuations of the love story you and your wife began together. Our fourth story transports us to a coastal monastery where waves whispered ancient secrets to those who knew how to listen. Here, where the boundary between sea and sky dissolved in morning mist, lived Master Umeko, whose understanding of impermanence had been deepened by decades of watching tides come and go. The monastery sat on cliffs overlooking an endless expanse of ocean, and its meditation halls were designed so that the sound of waves became part of the spiritual practice. Students came from distant lands to learn from Master Umeko, drawn by her reputation for teaching the profound lessons hidden within nature's simplest phenomena. On this particular morning, as dawn painted the sky in shades of pearl and rose, a young nun named Sachiko approached her teacher with a question that had been troubling her meditation practice. Master Umeko, she began, bowing respectfully. I have been observing my thoughts during meditation as you taught, watching them arise and pass away like waves upon the shore. But some thoughts return again and again, like waves that refuse to recede. How do I work with these persistent mental patterns that seem to resist the natural flow of impermanence? Master Umeko smiled and gestured for Sachiko to join her on the wooden platform that extended over the cliff edge, where they could observe the ocean's endless dance more closely. Tell me, dear student, when you watch these waves below us, do you see the same wave returning again and again, or do you see new waves that appear similar to those that came before? Sachiko studied the rhythmic movement of water against rock, her trained observer's mind examining the patterns. I see. New waves, Master. Each one is unique, even though they may appear similar in size or shape. Exactly so, Master Umeko nodded. And yet, what is it that creates the illusion that the same wave returns repeatedly? The pattern, Sachiko realized. The rhythm and the form remain consistent, even though the actual water is different each time. Your persistent thoughts are like these waves, the Master explained. What you perceive as the same worry or desire returning is actually a new arising that resembles previous ones. The pattern may be familiar, perhaps fear about your spiritual progress or longing for your family back home, but each time it appears, it is fresh, arising from the present moment's conditions. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the hypnotic dance of water and light. Seabirds wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the eternal conversation between wave and shore. But Master, Sachiko continued. If each arising is new, why do these patterns feel so solid, so permanent? Why do they seem to have such power over my peace of mind? Master Umeko picked up a handful of sand from the platform beside her, letting the fine grains slip slowly through her fingers. Watch how this sand falls, she said. Each grain follows the same path of gravity, creating what appears to be a single stream. Yet every grain is individual, falling in its own moment. The stream exists only as long as sand continues to fall. She brushed the remaining sand from her palm. Your thought patterns are streams of individual arisings, each grain a single moment of mental activity. The pattern appears solid only because the arisings follow each other so quickly, like frames in a motion picture, creating the illusion of continuous movement. So how do I work with these streams of thought? Sachiko asked. By remembering that streams can be redirected, Master Umeko replied. When you notice a familiar pattern arising, let us say worry about your meditation progress, you can acknowledge it without becoming the stream. Instead of thinking, I am worried, try observing, worry is arising. This small shift creates space between your essential awareness and the temporary mental weather passing through it. A large wave crashed against the rocks below, sending spray high into the air where it caught the morning sunlight like scattered diamonds before falling back to rejoin the sea. See how that wave expressed itself completely, then returned to the ocean from which it arose. Master Umeko pointed to the settling water. This is what happens when we allow thoughts and emotions to arise fully, be acknowledged, and naturally dissolve. Problems come when we either suppress the wave before it can express itself, or when we try to hold on to it after it has naturally completed its cycle. Sachiko felt a deep understanding beginning to dawn, like the sun now fully emerging from the horizon. So the goal is not to stop the waves, but to recognize that I am the ocean from which they arise. Beautiful, Master Umeko smiled. You are the vast, stable awareness within which all mental phenomena arise and dissolve. Waves of thought, emotion, and sensation come and go, but the ocean remains unchanged by their temporary presence. When you rest in this recognition, even the stormiest mental weather cannot disturb your fundamental peace. Over the following weeks, Sachiko practiced with this ocean and wave understanding. During meditation, when persistent thoughts arose, she would remember the cliffside teaching and silently acknowledge wave arising in the ocean of awareness. This simple recognition transformed her relationship with mental patterns that had previously seemed so solid and troublesome. She discovered that the thoughts themselves were not the problem. They were natural movements of consciousness, as inevitable as waves upon the sea. The suffering had come from identifying herself as the wave, rather than recognizing herself as the vast, peaceful awareness that remained constant through all mental weather. Our fifth story takes us inland to a mountain village, where an ancient temple housed a community of monks dedicated to the practice of loving kindness meditation. The temple, built of weathered stone and surrounded by gardens where every plant was chosen for its healing properties, had stood for over 1,000 years as shone a beacon of compass in a sometimes harsh world. Brother Jiryu had lived in this temple for 15 years, dedicating his life to cultivating boundless love for all beings. His days began before dawn with meditation, continued through hours of service to the community, and ended with evening prayers for the welfare of all creatures. Yet, despite his sincere efforts and pure intentions, he struggled with a challenge that seemed to contradict everything he had learned about universal compassion. There was one person, a merchant named Takeshi, who frequently visited the village, whose presence immediately triggered feelings of irritation and judgment in Jiryu's mind. Takeshi was loud, boastful, and seemed to take pleasure in displaying his wealth while showing little consideration for others' feelings. Whenever the merchant appeared in the village square, Jiryu found his carefully cultivated equanimity dissolving into frustration and critical thoughts. This inner conflict troubled Jiryu deeply. How could he claim to practice loving kindness for all beings while harboring such resistance toward one particular person? He had tried various approaches, forcing himself to think positive thoughts about Takeshi, avoiding the merchant entirely, and even attempting to see him as a teacher presenting a spiritual challenge. Nothing seemed to resolve the fundamental aversion that arose whenever their paths crossed. Finally, Jiryu decided to seek guidance from the temple's elderly abbot, Master Ryogen, whose wisdom had guided the community for over 4 decades. He found the master in the herb garden, tending to medicinal plants with the same gentle attention he brought to caring for troubled souls. "Master," Jiryu began hesitantly, "I come seeking help with a problem that challenges my understanding of compassionate practice. Despite years of loving-kindness meditation, I find myself unable to extend genuine goodwill toward one particular person. His behavior triggers such strong aversion in me that I question whether I have made any real progress in cultivating universal love." Master Ryogen continued his careful tending of the plants as he listened, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision among the healing herbs. "Tell me about this person," he said simply. Jiryu described Takeshi's behavior, his loudness, his materialism, his apparent lack of consideration for others. As he spoke, he noticed his voice growing tighter, his judgments becoming more pronounced with each word. "Ah," Master Ryogen nodded. "And what do you suppose this merchant is teaching you about the nature of compassion?" The question surprised Jiryu. He had been so focused on his failure to feel loving kindness toward Takeshi that he had not considered what the merchant might be offering as a teacher. I'm not sure, Master. It feels more like he's showing me the limits of my practice, the places where my compassion breaks down." Master Ryogen smiled and knelt beside a particularly struggling plant, one that looked weak compared to the vibrant herbs surrounding it. "When I tend this garden, should I give water and nutrients only to the plants that are already thriving? What about this small, sickly herb that seems to offer little beauty or medicinal value compared to its neighbors?" "Of course you would tend the struggling plant," Jiryu replied. "In fact, it probably needs more attention and care than the healthy ones." "Exactly so," the master agreed. "And in the garden of your compassion practice, who needs your loving kindness more? Those who are already easy to love, or those who trigger your aversion?" Jiryu felt a shift in his understanding, like a door opening in his mind. "You're suggesting that Takeshi is actually offering me a precious opportunity to deepen my practice. Consider this," Master Ryogen said, rising and brushing soil from his hands. "Anyone can feel loving kindness toward a sweet child or a gentle elder. The real test of compassion And its greatest gift comes when we can extend goodwill toward those who challenge us most. They are our greatest teachers, though we rarely recognize them as such. They walk together along the garden path, where late afternoon sunlight created patterns of gold and shadow among the healing plants. "But Master," Jiryu asked, "how do I cultivate genuine loving kindness for someone whose behavior I find so difficult? Wouldn't it be false to pretend feelings I don't have?" "Authentic compassion is not about manufacturing feelings," Master Raigen explained. "It begins with understanding." "What do you know about this merchant's history, his struggles, the experiences that shaped him into the person he is today?" Jiryu realized he knew very little about Takeshi beyond his public behavior. I don't know anything about his background or personal challenges." "Then, perhaps your first practice is curiosity rather than judgment. Everyone who acts in ways that trigger our aversion is responding to their own suffering, their own conditioning, their own unmet needs. Behind every difficult behavior is a human being struggling in the only way they know how." Master Raigen paused beside a fountain where clear water flowed over smooth stones, creating a gentle, continuous music. "The Buddha taught that all beings want to be happy and free from suffering. This merchant, despite his wealth and bravado, is seeking happiness just as desperately as anyone else. His methods may be misguided, but the fundamental longing is the same as yours. So loving kindness practice toward difficult people begins with recognizing our shared humanity." Jiryu asked. "Yes, and with understanding that your aversion toward him is actually information about your own attachments and judgments. He serves as a mirror, showing you the places where your heart is still contracted, still conditional in its love." Over the following months, Jiryu approached his challenge with Takeshi as a sacred practice rather than a personal failing. Instead of avoiding the merchant or forcing positive thoughts, he began to observe his reactions with curiosity. He noticed that his strongest judgments arose when Takeshi displayed wealth, and he realized this triggered his own unexamined beliefs about materialism and spiritual virtue. Gradually, Jiryu began to see Takeshi more completely, not just as a boastful merchant, but as someone who perhaps used displays of wealth to mask deep insecurities, someone whose loud behavior might stem from a need for attention and validation that had gone unmet in childhood. This understanding didn't immediately transform his feelings, but it created space for compassion to grow. He began to silently wish for Takeshi's genuine happiness and peace, knowing that someone who truly felt secure and loved would not need to seek validation through material displays. The breakthrough came during a village festival when Jiryu witnessed Takeshi quietly helping an elderly woman carry her heavy purchases, asking for no recognition and seeming embarrassed when someone noticed his kindness. In that moment, Jiryu saw the merchant's full humanity, the struggling soul behind the difficult personality, the tender heart hidden beneath layers of protective behavior. Our sixth story brings us to a monastery library where ancient texts held the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. Among these sacred scrolls and carefully preserved books worked Brother Kenji, whose love for learning had led him to spend 20 years as the temple's librarian and scholar. Brother Kenji had dedicated himself not only to preserving these precious teachings, but to understanding their deeper meanings. His days were spent in quiet contemplation among towering shelves of wisdom, where the scent of aged parchment and sandalwood incense created an atmosphere conducive to profound learning. Yet despite his vast knowledge of Buddhist philosophy and his ability to recite countless sutras from memory, Kenji found himself struggling with a peculiar form of spiritual pride. The more he learned, the more he began to judge others who seemed less knowledgeable about the Dharma. When younger monks asked simple questions or misunderstood basic concepts, he felt a subtle superiority that troubled his conscience. This internal conflict reached its peak one autumn day, when a new student arrived at the monastery. Daisuke was a former fisherman who had come a life-seeking spiritual guidance after changing experience at sea. Unlike the other monks who had joined the community with some educational background, Daisuke could barely read and knew nothing of formal Buddhist teachings. During the morning Dharma discussion, Daisuke asked what Kenji considered to be embarrassingly basic questions about meditation practice. As the weeks passed, Kenji found himself growing increasingly impatient with the new student's apparent slowness to grasp concepts that seemed elementary to someone of his scholarly background. One evening, as Kenji was organizing ancient manuscripts by candlelight, Master Hosen, the monastery's wisest teacher, entered the library with an unusual request. "Brother Kenji," the master said, "I would like you to spend tomorrow teaching Brother Daisuke about the nature of wisdom, but I want you to learn from him as well. Sometimes the greatest teachers are those who appear to know the least." Kenji was puzzled by this instruction, but agreed to spend the following day with Daisuke. He prepared carefully, selecting what he considered to be appropriate texts for someone of limited education, planning to start with the most fundamental concepts. The next morning, they met in the monastery garden, where Daisuke was tending to the vegetable plots with obvious care and attention. As Kenji began to explain basic Buddhist principles, he noticed something unexpected. While Daisuke struggled with the formal terminology and philosophical concepts, his questions revealed an intuitive understanding of suffering and compassion that came from lived experience. "Brother Kenji," Daisuke said during a pause in the lesson, "all these words about attachment and letting go, I think I understand them, but not from books. When I was on the fishing boat during that terrible storm, watching my nets disappear into the black water, I learned something about holding on too tightly. The harder I tried to save what was already lost, the more danger I put myself and my crew in." Kenji paused in his prepared lecture, suddenly interested in hearing more. "Tell me about that experience," he said. Daisuke's weathered face grew thoughtful as he continued working the soil. "The waves were taller than temple walls, and our boat was being tossed like a leaf. I kept thinking about my nets, my livelihood, everything I would lose. But then I saw one of my crew members swept overboard, and in that moment, I realized that all my worry about possessions was nothing compared to the preciousness of life." He paused to wipe sweat from his brow before continuing. "I let go of trying to save the nets and focused completely on rescuing my friend. It was only when I stopped grasping for what I thought I needed that I could do what truly mattered. Later, I realized this was what the traveling monk had meant when he spoke about non-attachment." Kenji felt something stir within him as he listened to this simple yet profound teaching. Here was someone who had lived the Dharma without studying it, who had discovered deep truths through direct experience rather than scholarly analysis. You learned in one night what I have spent years reading about, Kenji admitted, feeling his intellectual pride beginning to dissolve. But brother, Daisuke replied, with genuine humility, you know so many teachings that help explain what I experienced. When you talked about the Four Noble Truths, it gave me words for understanding that night on the water. My experience is like having traveled to a distant land, but your knowledge is like having a map that shows me where I've been and where the path continues. As their conversation deepened, Kenji began to see how his scholarly knowledge and Daisuke's experiential wisdom complemented each other perfectly. The fisherman's direct encounters with impermanence and suffering gave flesh to the philosophical concepts that Kenji had studied in abstract form. More importantly, Kenji realized that his sense of superiority had been preventing him from receiving the gifts that others offered. Every person who came to the monastery brought their own form of wisdom, their own piece of the vast puzzle of human understanding. Over the following weeks, their teaching relationship evolved into a true friendship of mutual learning. Kenji helped Daisuke understand the philosophical frameworks that could deepen his natural insights, while Daisuke shared the practical wisdom that came from facing life's storms with courage and compassion. One evening, as they sat together in the library, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge, Daisuke asked a question that would forever change Kenji's relationship to learning. Brother Kenji, with all these books containing so much wisdom, how do you choose which teachings to follow? Kenji had been asked this question before and usually responded with complex explanations about different schools of thought and interpretive approaches. But something in Daisuke's simple sincerity called for a different kind of answer. I'm beginning to think, Kenji said slowly, that the most important teaching is the one that helps you respond to life with greater compassion. All these books are just fingers pointing at the moon of wisdom. But the moon itself appears when we put the teachings into practice with an open heart. Like using a map to navigate, Daisuke nodded. But remembering that the map is not the territory itself, the seventh story unfolds in a mountain retreat, where the changing seasons provided constant teachings about the cycles of growth, death, and renewal. Here lived Master Yuki, whose name meant snow, and whose understanding of impermanence had been deepened by decades of observing how winter's apparent barrenness always gave way to spring's miraculous resurrection. The retreat consisted of simple wooden buildings nestled among ancient cedars, where a small community of practitioners had chosen to live in closer harmony with natural rhythms. Unlike the larger monasteries with their formal schedules and elaborate ceremonies, this mountain sanctuary followed the gentler patterns of sunrise and sunset, seasonal changes, and weather cycles. Among the residents was a middle-aged woman named Akiko, who had come to the retreat seeking healing from a series of devastating losses. In the span of 2 years, she had lost her husband to illness, her elderly parents in an accident, and her home to fire. Each loss had compounded her grief until she felt buried under an avalanche of sorrow that seemed to have no end. Akiko had been at the retreat for several months, participating in the daily practices of meditation, work, and study, but her heart remained frozen in an endless winter of mourning. She went through the motions of spiritual practice, but felt disconnected from any sense of hope or renewal. One morning in late winter, as snow still covered the mountain peaks, but the first hints of spring were beginning to appear in the valley below, Master Yuki invited Akiko to join her for a walking meditation through the forest. They walked in silence for some time, their breath creating small clouds in the crisp air as they followed a path that wound between trees heavy with snow. The forest was completely still except for the soft sound of their footsteps and the occasional call of a winter bird. Finally, Master Yuki stopped beside a massive oak tree that had clearly weathered many decades of mountain seasons. Its thick trunk was scarred by lightning strikes and the harsh winters, yet it stood strong and dignified, its bare branches reaching toward the pale sky with quiet confidence. "What do you see when you look at this tree?" Master Yuki asked. Akiko studied the ancient oak, trying to understand what lesson her teacher might be pointing toward. "I see a tree that has survived many storms, but right now it looks dead. Its branches are bare, and there's no sign of life." "Ah," Master Yuki smiled. "And do you believe this tree is truly dead?" "No," Akiko replied, beginning to understand. "I know that life is dormant within it, waiting for the right conditions to emerge again." "Yes, and how do you know this? What evidence do you have that spring will return to these apparently lifeless branches?" Akiko considered this carefully. "I suppose I know it, because I have seen the cycle before. I trust in the pattern of seasons, even when I can't see the evidence yet." Master Yuki nodded and placed her hand on the oak's rough bark. "This tree has endured lightning strikes that would have destroyed a smaller plant. It has survived ice storms that broke the branches of younger trees. Each trauma has made it stronger, more deeply rooted, more capable of weathering future challenges." They continued walking and soon came to a clearing where the snow had melted enough to reveal the first tiny green shoots of spring flowers pushing through the dark earth. The contrast was striking, life emerging from what had appeared to be barren ground. "Your grief is like this winter season," Master Yuki explained gently. "It feels endless and barren, but it is actually a necessary part of a larger cycle. Just as the tree uses winter to rest and gather energy for spring's growth, your period of mourning is allowing your heart to process these profound losses and prepare for whatever form of renewal awaits you." Akiko knelt beside the emerging flowers, touching their delicate petals with wonder. "But how can I trust that spring will come to my heart when the winter feels so absolute?" "By understanding that grief and healing are not opposites, but partners in the dance of recovery," Master Yuki replied. "The tree doesn't fight against winter or try to force spring to arrive early. It accepts each season fully while maintaining faith in the larger pattern." Over the following weeks, as actual spring began to transform the mountain landscape, Akiko started wisdom to her own healing to apply this seasonal journey. Instead of pushing against her grief or feeling guilty about her continued sadness, she began to honor it as a necessary season in her heart's recovery. She noticed that her grief was not as monolithic as she had believed. Some days brought the harsh winds of acute sorrow, while others offered the gentler melancholy of missing her loved ones. Occasionally, she experienced brief moments of warmth, gratitude for the love she had shared, or appreciation for a beautiful sunset, like the first spring flowers emerging through snow. Master Yuki taught her to welcome all of these experiences as natural parts of the healing process. Your love for those you have lost is like the tree's deep root system, she explained. Death cannot destroy it. It continues to nourish you, even during the winter seasons of grief, and will eventually support new growth in ways you cannot yet imagine. As spring fully arrived at the retreat, bringing cascades of cherry blossoms and the return of migrating birds, Akiko found herself experiencing something she had thought impossible. Moments of genuine joy that coexisted with her ongoing grief. She realized that healing didn't mean forgetting or getting over her losses, but learning to carry them as part of a richer, more compassionate heart. The ancient oak that had first taught her about seasonal wisdom now showed her its spring miracle. Thousands of tiny green leaves unfurling from branches that had appeared completely dead just weeks before. Each leaf was a testament to the tree's faith in renewal, its willingness to invest energy in new growth, despite having endured so much loss. Our 8th story takes us to a riverside temple where the constant flow of water provided endless teachings about the nature of change and continuity. Here lived Master Genshin, whose decades of watching the river's moods had taught him profound lessons about finding stability within constant flux. The temple sat on a bluff overlooking a wide river that served as the region's main transportation route. Throughout each day, the monks would see boats carrying merchants, pilgrims, and travelers past their peaceful sanctuary. The river's voice was always present, sometimes a gentle murmur during calm weather, other times a powerful roar when spring floods swelled its banks. Among the temple's residents was a young monk named Taro, who struggled with a common but distressing problem. Despite his sincere commitment to meditation practice, he found his mind constantly agitated by plans for the future and regrets about the past. The present moment seemed to slip through his awareness like water through cupped hands. Taro's restlessness had become so pronounced that it was affecting his sleep, his ability to study, and his relationships with fellow monks. He felt caught in a current of mental activity that seemed to sweep him away from the peace he sought through spiritual practice. One morning, after a particularly difficult insomnia-filled night, oft with anxious thoughts, Taro approached Master Genshin with his dilemma. "Master," he said, "I feel like I'm drowning in my own mind. No matter how hard I try to focus on the present moment, I'm constantly pulled into streams of worry about tomorrow or regret about yesterday. How can I find stability when my thoughts flow so chaotically?" Master Genshin gestured toward the river flowing past the temple. "Come, let us sit by the water and observe what it has to teach us." They settled on a wooden platform that extended over the riverbank, where they could watch the water's constant movement and listen to its endless song. The morning sun created patterns of light and shadow on the surface, while occasional fish created expanding circles of ripples. "Tell me what you observe about this river," Master Genshin said. Taro watched carefully for several minutes before responding. "I see constant movement. The water is always flowing, always changing. Sometimes it moves quickly, sometimes more slowly, but it never stops. And yet," Master Genshin pointed out, "there is something about this river that remains constant, even as everything within it changes." "What is that constant element?" Taro considered this question deeply. "The banks. No, those change over time too. The riverbed, that also shifts with floods and seasons. He paused, thinking. I suppose it's the flow itself, the capacity for movement, the space through which the water moves. Kikna. Excellent observation. Master Genshin smiled. Your mind is like this river. Thoughts, emotions, and sensations flow through it constantly, like the water flowing between these banks. Sometimes the flow is gentle and clear, other times turbulent and muddy. But what remains constant is awareness itself, the space through which all mental phenomena flow. A boat appeared upstream, its passengers visible as small figures against the morning light. They watched as it approached, passed directly in front of them, and continued downstream until it disappeared around a bend. Notice how we can see that boat clearly when it's in front of us, but we don't chase after it when it moves downstream, nor do we crane our necks trying to see it coming from far upstream, Master Genshin observed. We simply remain present with whatever is passing through our field of vision. So I should treat my thoughts like boats on the river? Taro asked. Exactly. When a worry aboutizes, acknowledge the future, are it like a boat passing by. But don't jump aboard and sail away with it. When a regret about the past floats into view, notice it without diving in to swim alongside it. Remain on the stable platform of present moment awareness, watching the flow without being swept away by it. Over the following days, Taro practiced this river meditation, both formally and informally. During sitting meditation, when his mind became caught up in planning or regretting, he would remember the image of sitting peacefully beside the flowing water, observing thoughts like boats passing by. The technique was not immediately successful. Often he would find himself on the boat of some worry or memory before remembering to return to the riverbank of awareness. But gradually, he developed the ability to catch himself sooner and return to the stable ground of present moment attention. Master Genshin taught him additional river wisdom. During their daily walks along the water's edge, see how the river doesn't fight against the rocks in its path. He pointed out one day when they encountered rapids. It flows around obstacles, sometimes with great power and noise, but always finding its way forward. This is how to work with difficult thoughts and emotions, not by fighting against them, but by allowing them to flow while maintaining your centered position. During flood season, when the river rose dramatically and flowed with tremendous force, carrying debris and creating muddy, turbulent water, Master Genshin used this as another teaching opportunity. Even in flood, the river remains a river, he told Taro as they watched the dramatic display of natural power. During periods of intense mental or emotional turmoil, remember that the essential nature of your awareness remains unchanged, even when the contents of consciousness are particularly turbulent. As Taro's practice deepened, he discovered that the river metaphor applied to many aspects of spiritual development. He learned to see his entire life as a flowing process rather than a series of fixed states, which helped him hold both successes and failures more lightly. The constant sound of flowing water became a kind of mantra for him, a reminder that everything in experience was in motion, and that his role was not to control the flow, but to remain peacefully present with whatever was moving through his awareness. Months later, when a new student arrived at the temple struggling with the same kind of mental restlessness, that had once tormented Taro. He found himself naturally sharing the river teaching that had transformed his practice. "The mind is like a river," he told the newcomer as they sat together watching the water flow past the temple. "We cannot stop its movement, but we can learn to rest peacefully on its banks, watching the flow without being carried away by every current." Our ninth story brings us to a temple famous for its gardens, where every stone, plant, and pathway had been arranged to create harmony between human intention and natural beauty. Here worked Master Sato, whose understanding of patience had been cultivated through decades of tending plants and observing their natural rhythms of growth. The gardens were considered among the most beautiful in the region, attracting visitors who came not only to admire their aesthetic perfection, but to experience the profound sense of peace that pervaded the carefully designed spaces. Each season brought its own special beauty: cherry blossoms in spring, lush greenery in summer, brilliant maples in autumn, and elegant bare branches traced against winter snow. Among the temple's residents was Sister Hanako, whose impatience with her own spiritual progress had become a source of considerable suffering. Despite 3 years of dedicated practice, she felt that her meditation was shallow, her compassion limited, and her wisdom minimal compared to what she believed she should have achieved by now. This frustration had intensified recently when she observed new students who seemed to grasp teachings that continued to elude her, and when she compared herself to senior practitioners whose apparent serenity made her feel like a spiritual failure. One morning, as Hanako was walking through the gardens in a particularly agitated state, criticizing herself for another unsuccessful meditation session, Master Sato called to her from where he was working among the bamboo groves. "Sister Hanako, would you help me with something? I need to transplant this young bamboo shoot, and I could use an extra pair of hands." Hanako joined him beside a small bamboo plant that appeared healthy but unremarkable compared to the towering mature bamboo surrounding it. "Master," she said as they carefully prepared to move the plant, "this little bamboo looks so insignificant next to these giant stalks. Will it ever grow tall enough to match them?" Master Sato smiled as he gently loosened the soil around the young. "It's actually, roots. This bamboo shoot quite remarkable." "Do plants the story of how bamboo grows?" Hanako shook her head, intrigued despite her inner turmoil. "When bamboo is first planted, it may show very little growth above ground for several years. A gardener who doesn't understand bamboo might become frustrated, thinking the plant is failing or that they're doing something wrong. But beneath the soil, the bamboo is developing an extensive root system that will support incredible growth when the time is right." They carefully lifted the young plant and moved it to its new location, where it would have more space and better light conditions. In its 5th or 6th year, Master Sato continued, bamboo can grow up to 90 feet in just 6 weeks. The spectacular growth that everyone admires is only possible because of the years of patient root development that no one can see. As they watered the newly transplanted bamboo, Hanako began to understand why her teacher had chosen this moment for this particular lesson. "Your spiritual development follows a similar pattern," Master Sato explained gently. "The years you've spent in meditation, study, and practice may not have produced the dramatic visible results you hoped for, but they have been developing the inner roots of wisdom and compassion that will support profound growth when conditions are right. But how can I know if I'm actually developing these invisible roots, or if I'm just wasting time? Hanako asked, expressing the doubt that had been tormenting her. Master Sato led her to another part of the garden where various plants were in different stages of growth. Look at this garden. Do you see any two plants that have developed at exactly the same pace or in precisely the same way? Hanako observed the diverse collection of flowers, shrubs and trees, each at its own stage of seasonal development. No, they're all unique in their timing and growth patterns, yet each is perfect for its current stage of development, Master Sato pointed out. That rosebush is in its 3rd year and just beginning to produce its most beautiful blooms. This pine tree has been growing slowly for decades and is still far from its mature height. The morning glories grow quickly but live only one season, while this ancient oak has been developing for over a century. They sat on a stone bench surrounded by this diverse of natural growth display patterns. The mistake many spiritual seekers make, Master Sato continued, is comparing their inner development to others' apparent progress, without understanding that each person's path unfolds according to its own natural timing and unique conditions. So I shouldn't be concerned about how long my progress is taking, Hanako asked. Be concerned with the quality of your effort and the sincerity of your practice, Master Sato replied, but release attachment to specific timelines or outcomes. Trust the process, just as we trust that this bamboo will grow when its root system is ready to support dramatic expansion. Over the following months, Hanako applied this bamboo wisdom to her spiritual practice. Instead of constantly evaluating her progress or comparing herself to others, she focused on maintaining consistent, sincere effort while trusting that unseen development was occurring beneath the surface of her awareness. She began to notice subtle changes that she had previously overlooked. Moments of spontaneous compassion, increased patience with difficult people, a gradual deepening of her capacity for presence during meditation. These small signs of growth became sources of encouragement rather than evidence of inadequate progress. The garden itself became her teacher in patience, showing her daily examples of how growth occurs in its own time according to natural laws that cannot be hurried. She learned to appreciate each season of her spiritual development, understanding that periods of apparent dormancy were often times of deep inner preparation. One day, nearly a year after the bamboo teaching, Hanako was sitting in meditation when she experienced a profound shift in her understanding of compassion. The insight arose effortlessly, like bamboo suddenly shooting toward the sky after years of root development. In that moment, she realized that all her previous practice had been preparing the ground for this deeper realization. Later, as she shared this experience with Master Sato in the garden, he smiled and pointed to the bamboo they had transplanted together. It had grown significantly, its stalks now reaching toward the mature height that had once seemed impossible for such a small plant. Growth happens, he said simply, when we provide the right conditions and trust the natural process. Our 10th story transports us to a forest monastery where ancient trees whispered secrets to those who knew how to listen with their hearts rather than their minds. In this sacred grove, where shafts of golden sunlight filtered through emerald canopies, lived Master Chen, whose understanding of inner stillness had been cultivated through decades of learning from the natural world's profound silence. The monastery consisted of simple wooden structures built harmoniously among towering cedars and flowering dogwoods, where a small community of seekers had chosen to live in communion with the forest's rhythms. Unlike the stone temples of busier regions, this woodland sanctuary seemed to grow from the earth itself, its buildings weathered to match the surrounding trees' bark. Among the residents was a middle-aged scholar named Wei Lin, who had arrived at the monastery carrying not luggage, but an invisible burden that weighed heavier than any physical possession. For 15 years, he had served as a government official in the capital city, where political intrigue, endless meetings, and constant decision-making had filled his days with noise that never seemed to quiet. Even in sleep, Wei Lin had come to the forest, seeking what he called the silence behind silence. Not merely the absence of external sound, but a deeper quietude that could calm the relentless commentary his mind had developed during years of analyzing, strategizing, and evaluating every situation from multiple angles. Despite months of forest living, meditation practice, and sincere effort to embrace simplicity, Wei Lin found his mind remained as busy as a marketplace at festival time. Internal conversations continued endlessly, reviewing past decisions, planning future scenarios, analyzing the wisdom teachings he heard, even critiquing his own meditation experiences. One misty morning, when dawn light was just beginning to penetrate the forest canopy, Wei Lin encountered Master Chen sitting motionless beneath an ancient pine. The old master appeared so still that he seemed to have become part of the tree itself, his presence creating a pocket of profound peace in the awakening woodland. After sitting quietly nearby for some time, Wei Lin finally spoke in whispered tones. "Master Chen, I have been practicing silence for many months, yet my mind continues its endless chatter. I came here seeking the peace you demonstrate so naturally, but I fear I am too conditioned by years of mental activity to ever find true stillness." Master Chen opened his eyes slowly, his gaze soft and welcoming. Without speaking, he gestured for Wei Lin to follow him deeper into the forest, where they walked in comfortable silence along paths carpeted with fallen leaves and morning dew. They paused beside a small clearing where a natural spring bubbled up from the earth, creating a pool of crystal clear water before flowing away as a gentle stream. The only sounds were the soft murmur of moving water and the distant call of a waking bird. "Tell me what you hear," Master Chen said quietly. Wei Lin listened carefully. "I hear the spring, some birds, the breeze in the trees. But Master, even as I listen to these peaceful sounds, my mind continues its internal dialogue about what I'm hearing, analyzing the experience instead of simply receiving it." Master Chen knelt beside the spring and cupped some water in his hands, watching as it naturally flowed between his fingers back to its source. "This water does not try to be still," he observed, "yet see how clearly it reflects the sky when it pools naturally. The movement and the stillness coexist perfectly." "But how does this apply to my restless mind?" Wei Lin asked. "Your mistake is believing that stillness means the absence of mental movement," Master Chen explained. "True silence is not achieved by stopping thoughts, but by changing your relationship to them. Like this water, your mind can be in motion and still reflect truth clearly. They sat beside the spring as morning light gradually illuminated the forest around them. Master Chen continued his teaching through gentle questions rather than direct instruction. When you watch this water flow, do you feel compelled to direct its course or judge its movement? No, Wei Lin replied. It flows naturally, according to the landscape. And when thoughts arise in your mind, why do you immediately engage with them as if they require your management and commentary? This question struck Wei Lin with unexpected force. He realized that he had been treating every thought as if it demanded his full attention and a secondary analysis, creating a layer of mental activity about his mental activity. So you're suggesting I observe thoughts the way I observe this flowing water, with interest but without interference? Precisely, Master Chen nodded. Thoughts arise from the landscape of your consciousness, just as naturally as this water springs from the earth. Your attempt to control or eliminate them creates the very disturbance you seek to escape. Over the following weeks, Wei Lin practiced this water-like awareness during his meditation sessions. Instead of fighting against the stream of thoughts or criticizing himself for mental activity, he learned to let his mind flow while maintaining the clear, reflective quality of still water. The breakthrough came during a morning meditation when Wei Lin realized that silence was not a destination to reach, but a quality of awareness that could coexist with any experience. Like the spring that remained clear even while flowing, his awareness could remain spacious and peaceful even while thoughts moved through it. Master Chen later explained that this understanding represented what the ancient masters called dynamic stillness, a state of profound peace that does not depend on external conditions or the absence of mental activity. The forest teaches us that true silence includes all sounds, he said, as they walked among trees alive with bird songs, rustling leaves, and distant water. Similarly, the silence of deep meditation includes all thoughts and sensations without being disturbed by them. Our 11th tale brings us to a temple dedicated to the practice of compassionate service, where monks and nuns devoted their lives to caring for travelers, healing the sick, and offering comfort to those facing life's inevitable hardships. This temple, built beside a major pilgrimage route, had welcomed seekers for over 3 centuries. Sister Mei Ling had served in this temple for 8 years, dedicating herself wholeheartedly to helping others through both spiritual guidance and practical assistance. She tended the temple's healing garden, prepared medicines from herbs, and offered counsel to the endless stream of pilgrims who sought refuge during their journeys. Despite her genuine desire to serve others and her reputation for kindness throughout the region, Mei Ling struggled with a problem that seemed to contradict everything she believed about compassionate action. The more she gave of herself to others, the more depleted and resentful she became, though she carefully hid these feelings behind a mask of selfless service. Recently, her exhaustion had grown so profound that she found herself snapping at fellow temple residents and feeling bitter toward the very pilgrims she was meant to help. This internal conflict tormented her. How could someone dedicated to compassion experience such uncharitable emotions? The crisis reached its peak when Mei Ling collapsed from exhaustion while preparing medicine for a group of sick travelers. As she lay in her own bed being cared for by others, she felt overwhelmed by shame at what seemed like her spiritual failure. Master Jade, the temple's elderly abbess, sat beside Mei Ling's bed with a knowing expression. Sister, your body has given you a teaching that your mind refused to hear. Sometimes we must be forced to receive care before we can learn to give it wisely. Master Jade, Mei Ling whispered, I feel like such a hypocrite. I preach compassion while harboring resentment. I serve others while neglecting the fundamental teaching of loving kindness toward myself. Ah, Master Jade smiled gently. And what makes you believe that caring for yourself contradicts caring for others? Are you not also a being deserving of compassion? This question revealed an assumption Mei Ling had never examined. She had somehow absorbed the belief that spiritual service required complete self-sacrifice, that attending to her own needs was selfish and unworthy of a dedicated practitioner. Tell me, Master Jade continued, when you prepare medicine in our healing garden, do you drain the medicinal plants completely, taking every leaf and flower until they die? Of course not, Mei Ling replied. I harvest carefully, taking only what the plants can spare while ensuring they remain healthy and continue growing. And why do you practice such care with the plants? Because if I exhaust them, they cannot continue providing healing for future needs. Sustainable harvesting ensures ongoing abundance. Master Jade nodded approvingly. Yet you have been harvesting your own energy, compassion, and physical strength without such wisdom. How can you provide sustainable service to others if you do not tend to your own renewal? Over the following days of forced rest, Mei Ling began to examine her understanding of compassionate service. She realized that her approach had been based on a subtle form of spiritual pride, the belief that her worth depended on how much she could sacrifice for others. Master Jade shared teachings about what Buddhist masters called wise compassion, service that includes discernment about one's own capacity and needs. The Buddha himself took time for solitude, rest, and personal practice, she explained. Even perfect compassion recognizes that sustainable giving requires periodic receiving. But how do I know when self-care becomes selfishness? Mei Ling asked. By examining your motivation, Master Jade replied. When you care for yourself in order to better serve others, it is wisdom. When you care for yourself at the expense of others who genuinely need help, it may be selfishness. The key is finding the balance that allows for both your well-being and your service to flourish. As Mei Ling recovered, she began implementing what she learned to call compassionate boundaries. She designated certain hours each day for personal practice and rest, treated her own needs with the same kindness she offered pilgrims, and learned to say no to requests that would compromise her ability to serve effectively over time. Paradoxically, as she began caring for herself with greater wisdom, her capacity for genuine service increased. Her interactions with pilgrims became more present and heartfelt because she was no longer running on empty reserves. Her counsel carried greater authenticity because it emerged from a more balanced understanding of human needs. Months later, when training new temple residents, Mei Ling would share the lesson her collapse had taught her. True compassion includes yourself in its embrace, she would explain. A lamp cannot illuminate others if it has no oil for its own flame. Our 12th story takes us to a mountain temple, renowned for its teachings on forgiveness, where the thin air and vast perspectives naturally encourage practitioners to release the grievances that weighed down their hearts. Here, among peaks that touched the clouds, lived Master Tenzin, whose understanding of forgiveness had been forged through personal experiences of profound loss and betrayal. The temple's location, high above the concerns of ordinary life, created perfect conditions for gaining perspective on human conflicts that seemed so important when viewed from ground level. Students came from distant regions to study with Master Tenzin, drawn by stories of his ability to help people release resentments that had poisoned their lives for decades. Among his students was a merchant named Hiroshi, whose prosperity had been destroyed by his business partner's betrayal 15 years earlier. The partner had not only stolen Hiroshi's money and customers, but had also spread false rumors about his character that made it impossible for him to rebuild his reputation in his hometown. Despite achieving modest success in a new city and starting a family, Hiroshi remained consumed by hatred toward his former partner. This resentment had become like a poison in his system, affecting his relationships, his health, and his ability to experience joy in his accomplishments. When Hiroshi arrived at the mountain temple, his first words to Master Tenzin revealed the depth of his spiritual wound. "Master, I have come seeking peace, but I cannot forgive someone who destroyed my life without remorse. Surely some actions are unforgivable." Master Tenzin listened with deep compassion, recognizing in Hiroshi's story echoes of his own past struggles with forgiveness. "Tell me," he said, after hearing the full account, "in these 15 years of carrying this hatred, has your former partner suffered as much as you have?" The question stopped Hiroshi short. He realized that his betrayer had likely forgotten about their conflict years ago and was probably living quite contentedly, while Hiroshi had spent a decade and a half in emotional torment. "You're saying that my hatred hurts me more than him," Hiroshi said slowly. "I'm saying that hatred is like holding a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned," Master Tenzin replied. "But forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment." "But doesn't forgiveness mean excusing what he did? Doesn't it make me weak?" Master Tenzin led Hiroshi to the temple's highest meditation platform, where they could see for miles across mountain valleys and distant plains. The perspective from this height made human settlements look tiny and insignificant. "From up here, can you see the village where your betrayal occurred?" Master Tenzin asked. Hiroshi scanned the distant landscape. "No, it's too far away and small to see from this height." "Yet it exists, and the events that happened there were real and significant to those involved." This elevated perspective doesn't deny the reality of what occurred. A broader context that it simply provides can reduce the emotional charge of those memories. So forgiveness is about gaining perspective. Forgiveness is about many things, Master Tenzin explained. It's about understanding that everyone acts from their own level of consciousness and conditioning. Your partner's betrayal arose from his fear, greed, or ignorance, not from his essential nature as a human being. They spent the afternoon exploring different aspects of forgiveness. Master Tenzin shared his own story of forgiving the soldiers who had destroyed his original monastery and killed several of his teachers during a period of political upheaval. "I spent years consumed by hatred," he admitted. "I dreamed of revenge and rehearsed angry confrontations that would never happen. But gradually, I realized that my hatred was keeping those soldiers present in my life more powerfully than they had ever been during the actual destruction. Through my resentment, I was giving them permanent residence in my heart. How did you finally let go? Hiroshi asked, by understanding that forgiveness is not a feeling but a decision, a choice to release the other person from the debt you believe they owe you. The feelings of peace and resolution often come later, but the decision to forgive can be made even while anger remains. Over the following weeks, Master Tenzin guided Hiroshi through a gradual process of releasing his long-held resentment. They began with small exercises, wishing his former partner freedom from the suffering that had caused his harmful actions, then progressing to more challenging practices of actively cultivating goodwill. The process was neither quick nor easy. Some days, Hiroshi felt he had made progress, only himself consumed by to thin fresh waves of anger the next day. Master Tenzin assured him that this was normal. Forgiveness often happens in layers, like peeling an onion. The breakthrough came during a meditation when Hiroshi experienced a profound shift in perspective. Instead of seeing himself as a victim of his partner's greed, he began to understand their relationship as a complex interaction between two flawed human beings, both responding to their conditioning and circumstances as best they knew how. I see now that holding on to this anger has been like choosing to remain in prison, even after the door was unlocked, Hiroshi told Master Tenzin. My partner destroyed my business 15 years ago, but I've been destroying my peace of mind every day since then. Master Tenzin smiled at this recognition. And now that you understand this, what will you choose? I choose to be free, Hiroshi replied, feeling a lightness in his chest that he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Our 13th story brings us to a riverside temple where the constant flow of water provided endless teachings about the nature of change and the art of flowing with life's circumstances rather than fighting against them. Here lived Master Liu, whose decades of observing the river's moods had taught her profound lessons about acceptance and adaptability. The temple was built on stilts above a river that regularly flooded during monsoon season, requiring the community to adapt their daily routines to the water's changing levels. This natural cycle of flood and recession had shaped the temple's philosophy around flexibility and non-resistance to natural forces. Among the temple's students was a young man named Jin, whose rigid personality and need for control had created constant friction in his relationships and career. Jin approached life like a military campaign, with detailed plans and strong expectations about how situations should unfold. When reality failed to match his expectations, he responded with frustration and increased efforts to force outcomes. This controlling approach had cost Jin his marriage, strained his family relationships, and left him feeling constantly stressed despite his professional success. He had come to the riverside temple after a friend suggested that Buddhist teachings might help him find greater peace with life's uncertainties. During Jin's first week at the temple, the river rose dramatically due to heavy rains upstream, flooding the lower levels and requiring everyone to move their activities to higher floors. Jin watched in amazement as the temple community adapted to these changed conditions with apparent ease, neither complaining about the disruption nor trying to fight against the rising water. How can everyone be so calm about this chaos? Jin asked Master Liu as they watched water swirl around the temple's support pillars. Doesn't this flooding disrupt all your plans and schedules? Master Liu smiled and gestured toward the flowing water below them. This river has been flooding seasonally for thousands of years. We built our temple to work with this reality rather than against it. Which approach do you think creates less suffering? Accepting the river's nature or demanding that it behave differently? But surely there must be ways to prevent these floods, or at least predict exactly when they'll occur, Jin insisted. We can observe patterns and prepare accordingly, Master Liu agreed. But the river ultimately follows its own timing and intensity. Our peace comes not from controlling its behavior, but from learning to flow with it skillfully. Over the following days, as the floodwaters gradually receded, Master Liu taught Jin to see the parallels between the river's natural cycles and the unpredictable flows of human experience. Your relationships, career, health, and circumstances all have their own seasonal patterns, she explained. Sometimes the waters of your life run calm and clear. Other times they flood unexpectedly. The question is whether to exhaust yourself fighting against these natural fluctuations or learn to navigate them with wisdom. But doesn't accepting things as they are lead to passivity? Jin asked. If I stop trying to control outcomes, won't I just become a victim of circumstances? Master Liu led him to observe how the temple community had responded to the flooding. They had taken appropriate action, moving valuable items to higher floors, adjusting their schedules, ensuring everyone's safety, while maintaining inner equanimity about the situation. Acceptance doesn't mean passivity, she clarified. It means taking skillful action based on reality rather than on how we wish things were. The river teaches us to be like water, flexible enough to flow around obstacles while maintaining the power to carve new channels when necessary. As Jin's understanding deepened, he began to examine his own pattern of resistance to life's natural changes. He realized that much of his stress came not from challenging situations themselves, but from his rigid expectations about how those situations should unfold. During meditation sessions beside the flowing river, Jin practiced what Master Liu called water mind, maintaining awareness that was fluid and adaptable rather than fixed and controlling. When thoughts arose about future plans or past disappointments, he learned to let them flow through his consciousness like water rather than grasping onto them as solid realities. The teaching became practical when Jin received news that his company was being restructured, potentially affecting his position. His old pattern would have been to immediately begin strategizing ways to control the outcome, creating detailed contingency plans, and becoming increasingly anxious about factors beyond his influence. Instead, Jin applied the river wisdom Master Liu had taught him. He gathered available information, took appropriate actions within his control, and practiced accepting uncertainty about the final outcome. To his surprise, this approach not only reduced his stress, but also allowed him to respond more creatively and effectively to the changing situation. I'm beginning to understand that fighting against change is like trying to make the river flow uphill, Jin told Master Liu during one of their evening conversations by the water's edge. It's not only impossible, but exhausting to attempt. And what have you discovered about flowing with change instead of against it? She asked. That it requires a different kind of strength, not the rigid strength of resistance, but the flexible strength of bamboo that bends in the storm without breaking. Our 14th story takes us to a temple famous for its meditation on impermanence, where practitioners came to learn the profound peace that emerges from accepting life's transitory nature. The temple's design itself embodied this teaching, with structures built to weather gracefully, showing their age and seasonal changes, rather than being maintained in artificial perfection. Here lived Master Yuki, whose name meant snow, and whose teaching style reflected the gentle, transformative power of natural cycles. She had spent 40 years observing how acceptance of impermanence could transform human suffering into wisdom. Among her students was an elderly woman named Grandmother Chen, who had lost her adult son in an accident 2 years earlier. Despite her advanced age and previous experiences with loss, this particular grief had shaken her faith in the spiritual teachings she had practiced for decades. Master Yuki, Grandmother Chen said during their first meeting, I understand intellectually that all things pass away, but my heart refuses to accept my son's death. At my age, I should have learned to let go gracefully, yet I feel like a beginner in the face of this loss. Master Yuki listened with infinite compassion, understanding that intellectual knowledge of impermanence was very different from the embodied wisdom that comes through lived experience. Honorable Grandmother, she replied, wisdom is not measured by how quickly we accept loss, but by how completely we allow ourselves to experience the love that makes loss so painful. Your grief is proportional to your love. It is not a sign of spiritual failure, but of spiritual depth. This perspective surprised Grandmother Chen, who had been criticizing herself for not handling her son's death with greater equanimity. But surely, after a lifetime of Buddhist practice, I should be able to face impermanence with more acceptance, she asked. Tell me about your son, Master Yuki requested gently. What kind of person was he? As Grandmother Chen described her son's kindness, humor, and the special bond they had shared, Master Yuki listened with complete attention. She could see how the depth of relationship made this particular loss especially challenging, regardless of the woman's spiritual understanding. Your son's life was like a beautiful flower that bloomed fully and brought joy to everyone who encountered it, Master Yuki said when the story was complete. When such a flower wilts, even experienced gardeners feel sadness. This is natural and appropriate. It honors the beauty that has passed. But how do I find peace with his absence? Grandmother Chen asked. By understanding that what you loved most about your son, his kindness, his laughter, the love you shared, these qualities have not died with his body. They live on in your memories, in the people he touched, and in the ways his influence continues to ripple through the world. Master Yuki led Grandmother Chen through the temple gardens, where they observed plants in various stages of their life cycles, some budding, others in full bloom, still others returning nutrients to the soil for future growth. See how each plant contributes to the garden's ongoing life, even after its individual flowering ends, Master Yuki pointed out. Your son's life continues to nourish the garden of existence in ways you may not fully see. Over the following weeks, Master Yuki helped Grandmother Chen explore the difference between attachment to form and appreciation of essence. While her son's physical presence was gone, the love they shared and the positive impact of his life remained as permanent contributions to the ongoing story of existence. Impermanence applies to forms, not to love, Master Yuki explained. Bodies age and die, relationships change their external structure, but the love itself is part of the eternal fabric of being. This teaching gradually transformed Grandmother Chen's relationship with her grief. Instead of seeing her son's death as a complete ending, she began to understand it as a transformation, like water changing from liquid to vapor, while remaining essentially water. The breakthrough came during a meditation when Grandmother Chen experienced a profound sense of her son's continued presence, not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as a living part of her own consciousness that would remain with her always. "I understand now," she told Master Yuki afterward. "I was grieving the loss of the form while forgetting that the essence continues. My love for him doesn't need his physical presence to remain real and nourishing." Master Yuki smiled at this recognition. "You have discovered what the ancient masters called deathless love, affection that transcends the changes of form and finds its home in the eternal present of the heart." Our 15th story brings us to a temple dedicated to the cultivation of patience, where the very architecture seemed designed to slow down time and create space for deep reflection. Here, in gardens where ancient trees had been growing for centuries, lived Master Kenji, whose understanding of patience had been developed through decades of observing natural rhythms. The temple's most famous feature was a meditation hall where students could sit facing a wall where water slowly dripped from a bamboo fountain, creating a rhythm so gentle that it seemed to stop time itself. This simple sound had been the background for countless moments of awakening over the temple's long history. Among the current residents was a young entrepreneur named Akira, whose fast-paced business career had trained him to expect immediate results and constant stimulation. Akira had achieved considerable success in the technology industry, but found himself increasingly anxious and dissatisfied despite his material accomplishments. "Master Kenji," Akira said during their first conversation, "I've come here because my life feels like it's moving too fast for me to enjoy it. I'm always thinking about the next goal, the next project, the next achievement. I've heard that meditation can help, but when I try to sit still, I feel like I'm wasting time that could be spent productively." Master Kenji observed the young man's restless energy, the way his eyes darted around the room, how his hands moved constantly, the underlying tension in his posture that spoke of a mind always ready for the next task. "Tell me about your most satisfying achievement," Master Kenji requested. Akira thought for a moment before responding. "Probably developing a software application that helps small businesses manage their finances. It took 3 years to perfect, and now thousands of people use it daily to improve their lives." "And during those 3 years, were you impatient for the project to be completed?" "Constantly," Akira admitted. "Every day felt like it was taking forever. I wanted to rush the development, skip testing phases, launch before we were really ready. Yet what would have happened if you had followed those impatient impulses?" Akira considered this carefully. "The software would have been inferior, probably full of bugs that would have frustrated users. The project's success came precisely because we took the time to develop it properly. Master Kenji smiled and gestured toward the dripping fountain. That water has been falling drop by drop for over 200 years. Each drop seems insignificant, yet collectively they have worn smooth grooves in the stone below. This is the power of patient persistence. But Master, surely there's a difference between productive work and just sitting in meditation. When I meditate, nothing seems to happen. Ah, Master Kenji nodded. And what did you expect to happen? This question revealed one of Akira's fundamental misunderstandings. He had approached meditation the same way he approached business projects, with specific goals, measurable outcomes, and timeline expectations. I suppose I expected to feel calmer, more focused, maybe achieve some kind of enlightenment experience, Akira admitted. And how do you measure the growth of an ancient tree? Master Kenji asked, pointing to a massive oak visible through the meditation hall's windows. You can't really measure it day by day. The changes are too subtle and gradual. Exactly. The tree doesn't grow because it's trying to become tall. It grows because growing is its nature, expressed through patient interaction with sunlight, water, and earth. Your inner development follows similar principles. Over the following weeks, Master Kenji introduced Akira to what he called process meditation, sitting practice that focused on the quality of attention rather than any particular outcome. Instead of meditating to achieve something, Akira learned to meditate as an expression of present moment awareness. The shift in approach was subtle but profound. Rather than constantly evaluating his meditation sessions as successful or unsuccessful based on how calm he felt afterward, Akira began to appreciate the simple act of maintaining gentle attention on his breath, regardless of what thoughts or sensations arose. I'm starting to understand something, Akira told Master Kenji after several weeks of practice. In my business life, I'm always focused on destinations, launching products, reaching sales targets, expanding market share. But meditation is teaching me to appreciate the journey itself. And how does this relate to patience? Master Kenji inquired. Patience isn't about waiting for something better to happen, Akira realized. It's about being fully present with whatever is happening now, trusting that this moment contains exactly what I need for my development. Master Kenji nodded approvingly. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is not something we attain, but something we recognize. It's already present in each moment of clear awareness. Patience allows us to stop rushing past these moments in search of some imagined future fulfillment. As Akira's practice deepened, he began to notice how his newfound patience was transforming other areas of his life. Business decisions became more thoughtful rather than reactive. Relationships improved as he learned to listen fully rather than planning his next response. Even simple activities like eating became opportunities for mindful appreciation. The most significant change came when Akira returned to work after his temple retreat. Instead of feeling anxious about lost time, he found that his month of patience practice had actually increased his productivity and creativity. The mental clarity gained through meditation more than compensated for the time spent in seeming inactivity. I understand now why you call this place a temple of patience, Akira told Master Kenji during his final visit. It's not teaching me to be slow or passive. It's teaching me to move through life with deliberate presence instead of anxious rushing. And what have you discovered about the relationship between patience and achievement? Master Kenji asked. That patience doesn't prevent achievement. It allows for deeper, more sustainable accomplishment. When I act from patience rather than anxiety, my work becomes an expression of wisdom rather than just ambition. Our 16th story transports us to a mountain monastery where the practice of gratitude was woven into every aspect of daily life. Here, among peaks that seemed to touch the heavens, lived Master Sato, whose radiant joy had been cultivated through decades of recognizing the extraordinary gifts hidden within ordinary moments. The monastery's location, high above the world's material concerns, created natural conditions for appreciating life's simple blessings. Each morning, residents would gather to watch the sunrise paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and rose, beginning their day with acknowledgement of beauty that cost nothing yet enriched beyond measure. Among the monastery students was a wealthy merchant named Tanaka, whose material success had paradoxically left him feeling empty and dissatisfied. Despite owning multiple businesses, a luxurious home, and more possessions than he could possibly use, Tanaka found himself constantly focused on what he lacked rather than appreciating what he had. Master Sato, Tanaka confessed during their first meeting, I have achieved everything I once thought would make me happy, yet I feel increasingly hollow. I find myself always wanting more profit, more recognition, more experiences. How can I find contentment when nothing seems to satisfy me for long? Master Sato listened with gentle attention, recognizing in Tanaka's words a common malady of those who had confused accumulation with fulfillment. Tell me about this morning's sunrise, Master Sato said unexpectedly. The sunrise? Tanaka looked confused. I didn't really notice it. I was thinking about a business meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Ah, Master Sato nodded. And what about the meal we shared an hour ago? I suppose it was adequate. Simple food, nothing special. The air you've been breathing since you arrived. What about it? Tanaka asked, growing more puzzled by these seemingly irrelevant questions. Master Sato smiled and gestured toward the vast mountain landscape surrounding them. In the past hour, you have received countless gifts that money cannot purchase. The beauty of dawn light on mountain peaks, nourishing food prepared with care, the breath of life flowing freely through your body. Yet your attention was so focused on future acquisitions that you missed these freely given treasures. But surely these are just basic necessities, not treasures, Tanaka objected. Let me ask you this, Master Sato replied. How much would you pay for your next breath if it were the last air available on Earth? What price would you place on sight if you were going blind? How much is a sunrise worth to someone who will never see another dawn? These questions began to shift something in Tanaka's perspective. He had been taking for granted the very foundations upon which all his achievements rested. The Buddha taught that suffering often comes from focusing on what we lack while ignoring what we have. Master Sato continued. Your wealthy lifestyle requires countless conditions to be maintained. Health to enjoy it, relationships to share it with, a stable society to protect it. When we acknowledge these supporting conditions with gratitude, abundance reveals itself even in simplicity. Over the following days, Master Sato introduced Tanaka to what he called gratitude practice, a systematic cultivation of appreciation that began with the most basic life requirements and gradually expanded to include all aspects of experience. The practice started each morning with acknowledging the gift of awakening to another day of life, something billions of people throughout history would have treasured beyond any material wealth. From this foundation, Tanaka learned to notice the miracle of his body's autonomous functions: heart beating, lungs breathing, eyes seeing, that continued without his conscious effort. "This is remarkable," Tanaka admitted after several days of practice. "I'm beginning to see that I've been like someone complaining about the size of their feast while sitting at a banquet table overflowing with delicacies." "And how does this recognition affect your relationship to wanting more?" Master Sato inquired. "The constant craving seems to quiet down when I remember what I already have. It's still there, but it no longer dominates my attention the way it used to." Master Sato introduced progressively deeper layers of gratitude practice. Beyond appreciating material conditions, Tanaka learned to cultivate thankfulness for challenges that had contributed to his growth, difficult people who had taught him patience, and even failures that had redirected him toward better opportunities. The most profound shift came when Tanaka began to appreciate what Master Sato called the gratitude of interconnection, recognition of the countless people whose work had contributed to every aspect of his daily life. "Consider that simple cup of tea," Master Sato suggested during one of their conversations. Its existence depended on farmers who grew the tea plants, workers who harvested and processed the leaves, merchants who transported them, artisans who created the cup, and countless others whose efforts you never see. Each sip connects you to this vast web of human cooperation. "I never thought about it that way," Tanaka mused. "Every aspect of my life involves gifts from people I'll never meet." This understanding naturally cultivates what Buddhists call sympathetic joy, happiness in the welfare of all beings, since their flourishing contributes to our own well-being. As Tanaka's gratitude practice deepened, his relationship to his wealth transformed completely. Instead of seeing his possessions as measures of personal achievement, he began to view them as resources held in trust, opportunities to contribute to the same web of interconnection that had supported his own success. "I'm beginning to understand that true abundance isn't about having more than others, but about recognizing the incredible richness already present in each moment," Tanaka told Master Sato as his visit neared its end. "And how will you maintain this understanding when you return to your business world?" Master Sato asked. "By remembering that gratitude is not just a spiritual practice, but a way of seeing reality more accurately. When I focus on what's lacking, I see only a small fraction of what's actually present. Gratitude reveals the full picture." Our 17th story brings us to a temple nestled within a bamboo grove, where the gentle rustling of leaves created a natural symphony that accompanied every meditation session. Here lived Master Akemi, whose understanding of resilience had been cultivated through observing how bamboo could bend almost to the ground during fierce storms, yet always return to its upright position when the winds calmed. The temple's design reflected this bamboo wisdom, with flexible structures that moved harmoniously with natural forces rather than rigidly resisting them. Students came across the region to learn from Master Akemi, particularly those who had been broken by life's storms and needed to rediscover their capacity for renewal. Among her students was a middle-aged potter named Ichiro, whose life had been shattered by a series of devastating losses over the past 3 years. His pottery workshop had burned down, destroying decades of work and his primary source of income. His wife had left him during the financial crisis that followed, and his elderly mother had passed away just as he was beginning to rebuild. These accumulated traumas had left Ichiro feeling brittle and defeated, like clay that had been fired too quickly and developed irreparable cracks. He had lost faith in his ability to withstand any further challenges, living in constant fear that the next inevitable difficulty would completely destroy whatever remained of his spirit. "Master Akemi," Ichiro said during their first conversation, his voice barely above a whisper, "I feel like I've been broken beyond repair. Each time I try to rebuild my life, something else goes wrong, and I shatter a little more completely. How can someone like me, who has been so thoroughly defeated, ever find the strength to face future challenges?" Master Akemi observed the deep weariness in Ichiro's posture, the way he held himself as if expecting another blow at any moment. She had seen this brittle quality in many who had endured repeated trauma, their natural resilience worn down by circumstances that seemed beyond their capacity to bear. "Come with me to the bamboo grove," she said gently, leading him along a path where thousands of green stalks swayed gracefully in the afternoon breeze. They walked in silence until they reached a clearing where an ancient bamboo plant stood taller and stronger than all the others, its root system clearly well established over many decades of growth. "What do you see when you look at this bamboo?" Master Akemi asked. Ichiro studied the plant carefully. "I see something that appears delicate, but must actually be quite strong to have survived so long. The individual stalks look fragile, but there are so many of them, and they're all connected underground." "Excellent observation," Master Akemi nodded. "Now watch what happens when the wind picks up." As if summoned by her words, a strong gust swept through the grove, bending the bamboo stalks dramatically. Some bent so far that their tops nearly touched the ground, yet none broke. When the wind passed, they sprang back to their original position with remarkable elasticity. "The bamboo teaches us something crucial about resilience," Master Akemi explained. "True strength is not about being so rigid that nothing can move you. It's about being so flexible that you can bend with life's storms without breaking." "But I feel like I've already been bent too far," Ichiro protested. "I don't think I have any flexibility left." "Tell me about your pottery," Master Akemi requested. "Before your workshop burned, what was your relationship to clay that cracked during firing?" "Those pieces were usually my greatest teachers," Ichiro replied, his voice growing stronger as he spoke about his craft. "The cracks would show me where my technique needed refinement, where the clay hadn't been prepared properly, or where the firing temperature was incorrect. Sometimes the most beautiful pieces came from learning to work with those imperfections." "And did you throw away every cracked piece, or did you find ways to honor their teaching?" "Many could be repaired using kintsugi, filling the cracks with gold to create something more beautiful than the original, Ichiro said, then paused as he began to understand the parallel Master Akemi was drawing. Your life has developed cracks, she said gently. But like your pottery, these breaks don't necessarily mean destruction. They can become places where wisdom, compassion, and strength flow in, creating beauty that wasn't possible before the breaking. Over the following weeks, Master Akemi taught Ichiro to reframe his understanding of resilience. Instead of seeing his struggles as evidence of fundamental weakness, he learned to recognize them as opportunities for developing what she called flexible strength, the capacity to adapt and recover that could only be built through experience with adversity. The bamboo's flexibility comes from its internal structure, Master Akemi explained during one of their daily walks through the grove. It's hollow inside, which makes it lighter and more able to bend without breaking. Similarly, resilience in humans often comes from developing inner spaciousness, the ability to experience difficulties without being completely filled by them. How does one cultivate spaciousness? Ichiro asked. Through this inner practices that create distance between your essential self and temporary circumstances. When you identify completely with your losses, you become brittle. When you recognize that you are the awareness that experiences loss, you maintain flexibility. Ichiro began to practice what Master Akemi called bamboo meditation, sitting quietly while visualizing himself as flexible and resilient, able to bend with life's challenges while maintaining his essential strength. During this practice, he would recall times when he had successfully adapted to difficult circumstances, recognizing that his capacity for resilience was still intact, despite recent overwhelming experiences. The breakthrough came when Ichiro received news that his former wife wanted to reconcile, but only if he could guarantee financial stability. His old pattern would have been to panic and desperately scramble to meet her conditions, regardless of whether that truly served either of them. Instead, Ichiro found himself responding with bamboo-like flexibility. He felt the emotional storm of her request, allowed it to bend him without breaking, and then naturally returned to his centered position, where he could respond wisely rather than reactively. I realize now that trying to guarantee financial stability would be like trying to make bamboo rigid, he told Master Akemi. It would destroy the very flexibility that allows for genuine resilience. I can offer my commitment to rebuilding our life together, but not false promises about controlling outcomes. And how does this recognition feel in your body? Master Akemi inquired. Like I've rediscovered my natural strength, Ichiro replied. Not the brittle strength that breaks under pressure, but the flexible strength that can weather storms because it doesn't fight against them. Our 18th story takes us to a temple famous for its teachings on loving kindness, where practitioners learn to extend genuine goodwill not only to those they naturally loved, but to all beings without exception. The temple's gardens were designed to represent this universal compassion, with paths that led visitors through areas dedicated to different categories of relationships. Here lived Master Chio, whose radiant warmth had been cultivated through decades of practicing what Buddhists call metta, the systematic development of unconditional friendliness toward all forms of life. Her presence alone seemed to create an atmosphere of safety and acceptance that allowed even the most guarded visitors to open their hearts. Among her students was a successful businesswoman named Yuki, whose competitive career had conditioned her to view most other people as either allies or obstacles to her goals. While Yuki was genuinely kind to her family and close friends, she struggled with feelings of irritation, judgment host, and evenility toward colleagues, strangers, and anyone who seemed to threaten her success or comfort. Master Chio, Yuki confessed during their first meeting, I understand intellectually that all beings deserve compassion, but I find it almost impossible to genuinely care about people I don't know or who have different values than mine. Sometimes I feel guilty about my lack of universal love, but I can't seem to force myself to feel what I don't naturally feel. Master Chio listened with the complete attention that had made her such an effective teacher, recognizing in Yuki's honesty a genuine desire for spiritual growth despite her current limitations. Your honesty is refreshing, Master Chio replied. Many people pretend to feel universal love while harboring the same selective compassion you've described. The fact that you recognize and acknowledge these limitations is already the beginning of wisdom. But how can I develop genuine caring for people I don't even like? Yuki asked. Tell me about someone you love easily and naturally, Master Chio requested. My daughter, Yuki replied immediately, her face softening. She's 8 years old, curious about everything, always laughing. I would do anything to protect her happiness. And what is it about your daughter that makes love flow so effortlessly? Yuki considered this carefully. I suppose it's because I see her essential innocence, her vulnerability, her potential for joy and growth. Even when she makes mistakes or has difficult days, I can see past the temporary behavior to the beautiful spirit underneath. Excellent, Master Chio nodded. Now, what if I told you that every person you encounter, whether friend or stranger, ally or competitor, once had that same essential innocence and vulnerability that you see in your daughter? This perspective had never occurred to Yuki. She tried to imagine her most irritating colleague as a curious 8-year-old, full of wonder and hope for the future. It's difficult to see that in adults who seem so hardened or selfish, she admitted. Of course it is, Master Chio agreed. Life experiences often create layers of protection around people's essential nature. But the loving heart that existed in childhood continues beneath whatever armor adults have developed for survival. Master Chio led Yuki through the temple's compassion gardens, where different areas were designed to evoke loving kindness toward various categories of beings. They began in the section dedicated to loved ones, surrounded by beautiful flowers and comfortable seating that naturally evoked warm feelings. Start here, Master Chio instructed, by fully experiencing the love you already feel for your daughter, your family, your closest friends. Let that warmth fill your heart completely. Yuki found this easy, feeling a genuine glow of affection as she thought about the people she cherished most. Now, Master Chio continued, recognize that this capacity for love exists within you always. It's not dependent on the specific people you're thinking about. It's a quality of your own heart that can be directed wherever you choose to focus it. They move to the next section, dedicated to neutral people, those toward whom Yuki felt neither strong attraction nor aversion. Here, the garden was more subdued, but still pleasant. designed to evoke a sense of basic goodwill. Think of someone you encounter regularly but don't know well, Master Chio suggested. Perhaps a shopkeeper, a neighbor, someone you see on your commute. Yuki brought to mind the security guard in her office building, a quiet man who always nodded politely, but with whom she'd never had a real conversation. Now imagine him as a child, Master Chio instructed, full of dreams about what his life might become. Picture him with people who love him, perhaps children who run to greet him when he comes home, or elderly parents who are proud of his steady job and kind character. As Yuki held this expanded vision of the security guard, she felt her heart naturally soften towards him. He transformed from a barely noticed background figure into a fellow human being deserving of happiness and free from suffering. This is the beginning of universal compassion, Master Chio explained. Recognizing the shared humanity that connects you to every person you encounter. The most challenging section of the garden was dedicated to difficult people, those who had caused harm or represented threatening energy. Here the landscaping was more stark, requiring visitors to find beauty in thorny plants and weathered stones. Bring to mind someone who has hurt you or whom you actively dislike, Master Chio instructed Yuki thoughtfully, of a former business, her trust and partner who had betrayed damaged her reputation. Even remembering this person caused her chest to tighten with resentment. Now comes the most advanced practice, Master Chio said. Instead of wishing this person would change or be punished, try to recognize that their harmful behavior arose from their own suffering. People who are truly happy and at peace don't intentionally hurt others. You're asking me to feel sorry for someone who deliberately harmed me, Yuki asked skeptically. I'm asking you to see the pain beneath their harmful actions, Master Chio clarified. This doesn't mean excusing their behavior or making yourself vulnerable to further harm. It means recognizing that their capacity to cause suffering is proportional to the suffering they carry within themselves. This practice proved extremely difficult for Yuki, but over several weeks of patient effort, she began to experience brief moments of genuine compassion, even for those who had hurt her. The key breakthrough came when she realized that holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. I'm beginning to understand that loving kindness isn't primarily for the benefit of others, Yuki told Master Chio as her practice deepened. It's a gift I give myself, freedom from the burden of carrying anger and judgment. And how has this practice affected your daily interactions? Master Chio inquired. Everything feels lighter, Yuki replied. When I meet new people, instead of immediately categorizing them as useful or threatening, I find myself curious about their stories, their struggles, their hopes. It's made even business relationships more enjoyable and effective. Our 19th story brings us to a temple renowned for its teachings on mindful speech, where practitioners learn to use words as instruments of healing rather than weapons of harm. The temple's architecture itself embodied this principle, with acoustic design that made every whispered word audible while naturally dampening harsh or aggressive tones. Here lived Master Endo, whose decades of studying the power of language had taught him that speech could either create suffering or alleviate it, depending on the intention and awareness behind each word. Students came from distant regions to learn from him, particularly those whose relationships had been damaged by careless or harmful communication. Among his students was a talented but troubled young man named Kazuto, whose sharp intellect and quick wit had made him successful in his career as a legal advocate, but had also created a pattern of using words as weapons whenever he felt threatened or criticized. Kazuto's cutting remarks and argumentative nature had cost him several friendships and romantic relationships. Even his professional success came at the cost of colleagues who respected his abilities but avoided personal interaction due to his tendency toward verbal aggression. Master Endo, Kazuto admitted during their first conversation, I know my speech causes harm, but when I feel attacked or misunderstood, words just pour out of me like arrows. I seem to have no control over my tongue when emotions rise, and afterward, I always regret the damage I've caused. Master Endo observed how Kazuto's body language changed as he described his pattern, his jaw tightening, his hands clenching, his voice taking on an edge even while discussing his desire to change. Show me how you hold your tongue when you speak, Master Endo requested unexpectedly. What do you mean? Kazuto asked, confused by the unusual instruction. Place your tongue gently against the roof of your mouth and speak a few words, Master Endo demonstrated. Kazuto followed the instruction and immediately noticed how the physical positioning affected not only the quality of his voice, but also the pace of his speech. Interesting, he observed. It naturally slows down my speaking and makes me more aware of each word before it comes out. The body and speech are intimately connected, Master Endo explained. When we learn to hold our tongue literally, it becomes easier to hold our tongue figuratively. But this is just the beginning of mindful speech practice. Master Endo led Kazuto to the temple's speaking hall, where students practice various forms of conscious communication. The room was designed with perfect acoustics, making every nuance of tone and intention clearly audible. Before we can learn to speak skillfully, we must learn to listen skillfully, Master Endo began. Most people are so busy preparing their next response that they miss the actual content and emotion of what others are sharing. He invited Kazuto to practice what he called empty vessel listening, receiving another person's words without immediately filling the silence with reactions, judgments, or counter-arguments. When someone speaks to you, imagine your mind as an empty bowl, Master Endo instructed. Allow their words to fill the bowl completely before adding anything of your own. This creates space for understanding rather than just reaction. During the following days, Kazuto practiced this listening technique with fellow students, discovering how difficult it was to simply receive communication without immediately formulating responses. His legal training had conditioned him to listen for weaknesses in arguments rather than seeking to understand the speaker's perspective. I'm beginning to realize that I've been having conversations with my own assumptions rather than with actual people, Kazuto told Master Endo. When I truly listen, I often discover that what I thought someone was saying is quite different from what they actually meant. And how does this deeper listening affect your impulse to respond aggressively? Master Endo inquired. It's remarkable. When I feel truly heard and understood, my defensiveness dissolves. And when I focus on understanding others rather than defending myself, I naturally respond more thoughtfully. Master Endo then introduced Kazuto to what Buddhist teachings call right speech. communication that is truthful, helpful, and spoken with good intention. This involved examining not only the content of words, but also their timing, tone, and underlying motivation. Before speaking, particularly when emotions are stirred, ask yourself 3 questions. Master Endo taught, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it the right time to say it? If any answer is no, consider remaining silent or finding a more skillful way to express your thoughts. The practice proved challenging for Kazuto, whose quick mind was accustomed to immediate verbal expression. Learning to pause and consider his words felt initially like wearing heavy boots when he was used to running barefoot. However, as he continued practicing mindful speech, Kazuto began to discover unexpected benefits. His legal arguments became more persuasive because they were more carefully crafted. His personal relationships improved as people felt safer sharing their true thoughts with him. Most surprisingly, he found that speaking less actually gave his words more impact when he did choose to use them. The breakthrough came during a heated discussion with a colleague who had criticized one of Kazuto's legal strategies. His old pattern would have been to immediately launch into a defensive counterattack, using his verbal skills to demolish critics' positionish his. Instead, Kazuto found himself pausing, taking a conscious breath, and asking, "Help me understand what concerns you about this approach." The simple shift from defending to inquiring completely transformed the dynamic of their interaction, turning a potential conflict into a collaborative, problem-solving session. I'm discovering that words have much more power when they're used to build bridges rather than walls, Kazuto shared with Master Endo. When I speak from curiosity rather than defensiveness, people actually want to engage with me instead of avoiding me. And what have you learned about the relationship between inner peace and outer speech? Master Endo asked. That they're inseparable, Kazuto realized. When my mind is calm and clear, my speech naturally becomes more skillful. When I'm agitated or fearful, even my best intentions get distorted by the emotional turbulence underneath. As our journey through these sacred teachings comes to a gentle close, allow yourself to rest in the profound silence that follows wisdom. These 16 stories have been seeds planted in the garden of your consciousness, each one carrying the potential for deep transformation as you continue your path toward inner peace. The ancient masters who first shared these teachings understood that true learning happens not in the mind alone, but in the quiet spaces between thoughts, in the stillness that follows understanding, and in the dreams that carry wisdom into the depths of renewal. May these timeless truths continue to unfold within you, bringing ever deeper layers of peace, compassion, and awakening to your journey through this precious human life.